Okay, when I had corn tortillas, I forgot the book said corn had so much gluten and protein. So yeah, I mean, Veronica, you can't forget about corn. Corn is, again, one of the big myths that people do forget about as it relates to the gluten-free diet. Question coming in: what is my thought on lithium orotate? Well, I have lots of thoughts on it, but most people don't need lithium orotate as a supplemental. There are usually most people take lithium for depression or bipolar disease. I don't know why you're taking it, Tiffany. I mean, without more information, it's really hard for me to comment one way or the other. But in my experience, it's very, 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 very rare that lithium orotate is ever necessary in cases of bipolar depression. Usually there's an underlying nutritional or psychological or biochemical reason as to why they're suffering, and lithium orotate is generally not solving any of those reasons. It's just basically it's basically medicinal in its effect to help the symptoms, but not necessarily curative of why the symptoms are there. Okay, let's see here. Going back and forth. So yeah, I've mentioned this before. A lot of you ask me about particular brands or specific products. I don't like to comment on specific products when my comments are not going to be good, and I don't want to badmouth any companies that are out there. It's just a policy. I like to say something good or not say something at all, right? So for future reference, please don't ask me about other brand names, other products. If I don't mention them directly, there's probably a reason why I'm not mentioning them. Okay. Sandra says, I have a question. I'm gluten intolerant. Is there such a thing as wheat pollen, and how bad is it? I live in wheat field country. But well, yeah, that in that scenario, if you live in wheat country and you're allergic to wheat, you really ideally want to have a air filter, preferably something along the lines of ultra-fine HEPA, where you're really pulling small particulate out of the air. And so in those times of the year when the crop is coming in, you want to run that filter full time. And obviously, when that pollen's coming out in high levels, you want to be inside. You don't want to be outside in those types of scenarios. I know I've known a number of people who grew up in farm country, and when the corn's coming in or the wheat's coming in, they're allergic, and they really struggle during that time of the year. And so this is a strategy I can give you. It's not ideal to live in an area where you're vastly allergic to everything around you, but sometimes we can't control the external environment, and that's where ultrafine HEPA can be helpful. But I have a supplemental product that I make. It's called HistAssist, and you can pick it up online at glutenfreesociety.org. But HistAssist is designed to help. It's full of vitamin C, quercetin, and acetylcysteine, and nettle, and some other things that help to stabilize the mast cells. The mast cells are the cells, the immune cells in your body. When exposed to external allergens, your cells break open and release histamine, and that's why people that have a lot of outdoor allergies, they take Benadryl or Singulair or some of these other medications because they're antihistamines. Now the problem with using an antihistamine is that if you use an antihistamine because you're allergic to the outdoor environment and you're constantly using them, they actually suppress your immune system. But antihistamines also block your capacity for stomach acid production. Remember that part of how we make stomach acid is through histamine. So if you're blocking your histamine, you're predisposing yourself for long-term malabsorption of calcium and zinc and magnesium, because they all require acid to be absorbed. So if you're taking a drug to artificially manipulate your histamine levels lower, you're also reducing your capacity to produce stomach acid. And when you do that, again, you can become malnourished, protein malnourished, mineral malnourished. You can also predispose yourself to infection, because stomach acid is one of the ways our body fights bacteria and viruses and other things that we eat through our food. That stomach acid is the stopgap. It's one of the 5 primary barriers of our immune system. So, instead of taking antihistamines, you can take HistAssist. It's a mast cell stabilizer. So it takes the membrane around the mast cell and makes it harder to break open, easy to release all those histamines. So it stabilizes that membrane, and it can dramatically reduce the symptoms associated with seasonal allergies. So that would be an additional piece of advice that I would recommend that you look at doing. Nutritionally supporting yourself with something like that can be very, very helpful at reducing the potential for symptoms. Okay, let's see here. Hey, Jessica says, excited to see you and hear you at your lecture in November. So I'm doing a lot of lectures in November, Jessica. I'd love to know which one you're talking about. Are you talking about the lecture in California, at the hospital in California, or are you talking about another location? Let me know. Love to hear where you're going to be. Does humidity interfere with pain? Is winter bad for RA? Yeah, it can be. Let's talk about that. So winter months can be extremely bad for chronic rheumatological pain, mainly because of the cold. And when it's cold, we get basically, our extremities can get colder. So depending on how warm you're staying or where you're at, or whether you have central heat or whether you don't have central heat, but if you're out and about, that coldness can set in, and that coldness can reduce blood flow to your extremities, and that in and of itself can, remember, we need blood flow to deliver oxygen and to deliver nutrients to those joints. So in a state of chronic winter, a lot of RA patients, they flare. A lot of autoimmune arthritic patients flare when it's very, very cold outside as a result of lack of blood flow or diminished blood flow carrying oxygen and nutrients into their tissue for, to help them heal and to help them repair that inflammatory damage from RA. I'd say the bigger question is not whether cold weather makes it worse, but I'd say the bigger question is what's actually causing the RA. Again, go back to No Grain, No Pain. No Grain, No Pain, follow the 30-day diet, because what you might find is cold weather or warm weather, irregardless of the fact, if your diet's dialed in and your lifestyle is dialed in, the RA has the potential to go away, and then you don't have to worry about whether the weather's cold or hot. And I would much rather see a person not care about cold or warm weather as a result of their disease becoming exacerbated by the weather, and more specifically understanding what the underlying reason that the disease is there for and addressing those underlying reasons. Because RA does not exist because of cold weather, but it can be exacerbated by cold weather, and again, not quite the same thing. We want at the end of the day, ultimately, we don't want to have to live and die by the weather. Let's see here. Is monk fruit gluten-free? It sure is. Monk fruit is gluten-free. Would I recommend genetic testing for a person who overall feels pretty healthy but just wants to know what they're lacking or allergic to? I think it depends on where you're at. I mean, yes, if you're, the reality is if you do testing, there's going to be a cost associated with that. And if it's worth to me, it's worth the cost, because your health is your wealth. At the end of the day, most Americans work their entire life, right? They work most Americans work the first 65 years of their life drilling and working and drilling and working, right? Trying to accumulate wealth. They're basically working their tails off trying to accumulate success and wealth. But in the process of doing that, ignoring their health and ignoring diet and ignoring healthy lifestyle. And so they end up destroying their health in their first half of their life. And then acquiring that wealth, they spend all of their acquired wealth trying to figure out how to get healthy again. And so that now they're at a point where they can retire, should be able to retire, and they should be able to enjoy life, but they're not able to because their health has deteriorated as a work of the imbalance that shows up in their life because their priorities were messed up. And when I say priorities are messed up, look, if you currently don't have the priority of exercise in your life, or sunshine, or diet, or healthy sleep in your life, your priorities are messed up. If you don't have priority of spending time with loved ones instead of spending time always in the internet and always, here we are on the internet, right? So hypocrite. But my point being is there's a balance to all of these things. And if you don't have prioritized balance within your life, the reality is you are going to pay a price over time. And when you do retire, you're going to have to spend all of your accumulated wealth trying to recapture your health. It's a lot more expensive to do it that way than it is early on to be very, very preventative. It's very easy to test to see if a person's allergic or gluten sensitive or nutritionally deficit. Those are easy tests to run. And to me, they're far more worth doing consistently over time then hoping you're guessing it right, and then running into a point where your body decides it's going to fail on you because you've been living an imbalanced type of lifestyle. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Travis. Let's see here. All right. What are my thoughts on Hashimoto's and gluten? Well, gluten can cause Hashimoto's. It's pretty simple, and it's not even a matter anymore. Maybe 15 years ago, some people would say, well, the correlation between Hashimoto's, for those of you listening, is an autoimmune form of hypothyroidism, where the thyroid is basically being attacked by the immune system, and so it's not working as well, so we become hypothyroid. Again, 15 years ago, we could have said, there's not enough compelling research to say there's a direct connection. Today, we absolutely know that gluten can cause Hashimoto's. Now, is gluten the only cause of Hashimoto's? The answer there is absolutely not. There are certainly many forms or different ways that autoimmune disease can be created in a person. And again, I've talked about this a number of times. Just categorically speaking, food is a trigger. Infection can be a trigger. Another trigger is chemical exposure. There have been a number of links of women with silicone breast implants developing Hashimoto's, or people with herniation repair meshes that develop autoimmune disease. There's something called Asia, which is autoimmune, an autoimmune process that's caused as a result of adjuvants and vaccines. So, flu shots, people that go get their yearly flu shot, the mercury is known to trigger an autoimmune process and has been linked to autoimmune thyroid disease. So there are a number of different reasons why we might see people develop thyroid autoimmunity. Gluten is certainly at the top of the list of knowns. And so my advice to anybody with autoimmune disease, period, if you have autoimmune disease and you haven't been tested for gluten sensitivity, you need to get tested for gluten sensitivity. And the only way to properly do that accurately is to get genetic testing done. If you're doing all these lab tests that measure antibodies, understand that just in forms of gluten, there are close to 1,000 different forms of gluten. So there's no lab that measures the different antibodies to all those different forms of gluten. Genetic testing, though, measures your genetic propensity to react to gluten, and that's what you really want to understand. So if you have autoimmune disease and you're eating gluten, or you haven't been tested for gluten, or you're on the fence about gluten, you're not quite sure about gluten, you need to get genetically tested so that you can get clarity to take action one way or the other, whether you're negative for gluten sensitivity or whether you're positive for gluten sensitivity. You got to get clarity, because once you have clarity on gluten, you can start getting clarity around those other issues. A lot of those other issues, again, foods can be a trigger, chemicals can be a trigger, infection can be a trigger, nutritional deficiency can also be a trigger for autoimmune disease, including hypothyroidism. Matter of fact, one of the nutrients most associated with autoimmune thyroid disease is vitamin D deficiency. So definitely can be a trigger. Good question. Okay, so back to some of the myths. So again, we said that the diet being nutritionally unsound is a myth. We said that grain in Europe or in other countries is somehow healthier than the grain here. We said that was a myth. We also talked about corn and rice as being gluten-free as being a myth. And one of the other myths around the gluten-free diet. Okay, somebody's asking about eyes swelling shut. Well, eyes can swell shut for a lot of different reasons. For many people, eyes can swell shut as a result of being exposed to external allergens. There are a number of different allergens depending on where you live and what region of the country you're in. But there's ragweed and different tree-based pollens. Some people will have, dogs or animals, cats, and they'll be allergic to them, and the dander can cause an inflammation around the eyes and create a swelling. You can have an infection or a conjunctivitis or a blepharitis, which is another type of inflammation. So there are a number of different reasons why the eyes can basically swell shut. One of the things I highly recommend, if that's happening to you on a regular basis, is ideally get in and see a functional medicine doctor who's also an eye doctor. That would be the best of both worlds. Dahlia, hi from Georgia. Thought on vitiligo, gluten-free for 2 months. How long till I see improvements in the skin? Great question, Dahlia. I've seen a lot of people with vitiligo come through the clinic in the last number of years, and it's one of two ways. Either we see, one of three ways. Sometimes we see a repigmentation of the areas that have lost pigmentation. And usually in those cases, in my experience, again, this is my experience, is when we see repigmentation, it's usually on new lesions, early lesions, and not super progressive disease. So if a person waits 30 years before they address their vitiligo, I typically don't see repigmentation in those people by changing diet and implementing functional medicine. The other scenario is we'll see changes within a few months. We'll see in earlier lesions where somebody catches it early enough, and we'll start to see some repigmentation come back within a few months. And in other scenarios, we won't see repigmentation of the existing lesions, but we'll see a halting of the progression of greater lesions. In essence, sometimes what happens is, you get a depigmentation here, then you get another one here, and it's rapidly progressing. But when we figure out why that disease exists, why that autoimmune disease is happening, and we stop those triggers, then we see a halting of the progression, but we don't see a repigmentation. So those are the three primary types of outcomes. I don't predict the future. I don't think any doctor can. But those are kind of the scenarios that we see. Now, with vitiligo, it's very important that you have your vitamin B12 and your folate and your CoQ10 and your vitamin B2 and your zinc levels adequately tested, because those nutrients play a major role, as does copper and vitamin C. They play a major role in the way that your skin pigmentation works. And so if you have deficiencies in those, it could be that, by changing your diet, that you halt the progression, but you don't see repigmentation because you have nutritional deficiency that is basically blocking the process of allowing for repigmentation. So again, there are multi-variable scenarios within that question, but hopefully that answer was somewhat helpful for you. Are coffee enemas good to get rid of past gluten exposure? I don't think so. Look, coffee enema is a pretty aggressive thing, and it's not to say that it can't be helpful. Dr. Nicholas Gonzalez, a famed doctor for treating pancreatic cancer and expanding people's 2-year life expectancy to 5+ years, was a very big advocate of using coffee enemas for detoxification. And from that perspective, they can be quite helpful, but I don't recommend getting into the habit of doing coffee enemas to overcome an exposure to gluten. If you're looking for something to kind of defeat or overcome gluten exposure that's less aggressive and a little bit easier to do and has a tremendous benefit on your overall health regardless, is to do what's called a vitamin C flush. And we can put up, there's a product that on Gluten-Free Society that I like to recommend people use called Detox C. And it's a non-corn derived vitamin C free-form powder that you mix into water and drink it, and you can do what's called a vitamin C flush, which will flush out your gut and help clean out your gut. And that can be done in about 4 to 6 hours for most people. It's a lot easier to do than a coffee enema, and you'll also benefit in other ways from the vitamin C. Vitamin C is like human duct tape. It's very effective at helping modulate inflammation, feeding the immune system, helping repair inflammation in the GI tract. There have been a number of studies showing the benefit of vitamin C on adrenal function and on collagen synthesis and on leaky gut. So vitamin C is what I would recommend. Combine that with, if you're eating OPF, those of you who don't know what OPF is, as a matter of fact, if you know what OPF is, go ahead and type it in to the feed right now if you know what I'm talking about with OPF. And I want to see if you guys have been paying attention for the last several months, because we've talked about OPF a number of times. But if you're eating OPF, one of the best things you can take is Gluten Shield. Gluten Shield is a digestive enzymatic formula that helps to reduce and minimize, because it degrades gluten. So it breaks down gluten-based proteins to make them less harmful. Now, understand what Gluten Shield is not. Gluten Shield is not something that you want to take so that you can go and eat gluten. It's something that you want to take if you're eating OPF to protect yourself from the potential of cross-contamination. So I like it. So Cherie, you win. She says other people's food. That's right, other people's food. Don't eat OPF unless the OPF is your BFF and they have the gluten-free diet super dialed in to the same definition that you have it dialed in, which is the way we dial it in here on the Big Dr. Osborne's Brain Show, which is the true gluten-free diet. So don't eat OPF unless it's your BFF and they have the true gluten-free diet dialed in. That's kind of the general rule of thumb, because a lot of people will try to trick you into eating their food, and relatives are the worst. I mean, we all go through it, right? You go to your grandma's house, or you go to your aunts or your uncles, and they made your favorite dish, or what is the seasonal favorite dish. And so what happens is they're like, oh, a little bite won't hurt you. And the reality is, yes, a little bite will hurt you. And so you always, when you're going and you're traveling and you're visiting other people, you always want to plan for OPF. And the way you plan ahead is you call that person and don't show up and insult them after they've spent 6 hours in the kitchen making food for everybody. But you call them in advance, and you call them ahead of time and say, look, I'm probably going to bring my own food. I don't want you to be offended because I love you and I love your cooking, but I've discovered I'm gluten sensitive, and I don't want to hurt myself, and I just don't want to put that burden on you. It's not your burden to carry. So please understand when I come, and don't take it as an insult. Like, have that honest conversation before you even show up to that person's house. And that way they're less apt to try to spoon feed you, right? Something that is going to potentially hurt you. But very, very important that you understand that. Cheryl says, hi, Dr. Osborne. I did the vitamin C detox. Thank you. It worked. Yes, it works well. My favorite way to purge a gluten exposure. All right. My eyes swell shut from cats. I love cats. Maxine, interestingly enough, I've seen people who were allergic to animals, and this isn't 100% true 100% of the time, but I've seen a number of people who are allergic to cats or pets, dogs, etc. And when we got their immune system strong and healthy, they were able to tolerate those animals again. Actually, one of my clients was a little girl, and she had a form of mast cell disease, and when we got our immune system working and really thriving again, she was able to go out and get a pet and not have severe outbreaks on her skin. So it's very possible to do that, but again, part of fixing your immune system, if it's overreactive or if you've got an autoimmune process, or helping your immune system, respond appropriately to the environment, is making sure you understand what can make it break down in the first place. And so going back to No Grain, No Pain, if you read the book, you'll get the premise, the basic, because there's too much for us to go into the show tonight, but you'll get the basic premise of all the different trigger factors for what can make an immune system go crazy or go haywire, and start working those and just see if you don't have less of a reaction over time to your favorite little animals, your furry little friends. I love animals. I love my dog. Any of you have seen my dog Zeus? He's my German Shepherd. He's 95 pounds, and he's a long hair. And so you want to talk about dander? It's everywhere. He's an animal. He just he's got it all over the place. But because we keep our immune system strong and healthy, nobody in the household has any problems with that. Okay, I'm going back to YouTube here. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between. I love this OPF. Everybody's chiming in and getting the answer right. So you guys are paying attention. Great. Love that. So Andrea D says, I love exercise, but it causes my fibro to go into full flare, and I have to stop in order to continue functioning. Any suggestions? It depends on the kind of exercise that you're doing. So some people do better with kind of a yoga, stretching, mobility, not heavy weights, not high intensity type of activity. And some people do really well and thrive on a high intensity interval like CrossFit style or intermittent interval style training. And so I would say if you've been exercise intolerant, there are a few things that you can do. One, start up trying first with a mild yoga class, something that is a little less aggressive. It's more working on flexibility, motion, fluidity, and movement. And it will work some strength at the same time, and see how well you tolerate that. One of the other things that some people with exercise intolerance do really well is with swimming pools, pool work. And so getting in the pool where there's no gravity, you can still get good exercise without overworking your muscles or putting them under too much stress or duress, creating a flare and fibromyalgia. The other thing you might try is a whole body vibration plate. And before, these plates, if you buy a good one, they're a couple of $1,000s. So before you invest in that kind of money, call up there are a number of different physical therapy centers and chiropractic offices sometimes have them. Or call up somebody and see if they have one that you can come try out and come use. a couple of times just to see how well you do with it before you make that investment in purchasing something like that. But whole body vibration can be very effective too. For those of you who aren't familiar with whole body vibration, what it is basically it's a platform that you stand on, and there are a number of different exercises that you can do. And the vibrational frequency or force of vibration stimulates bone and it stimulates muscle growth, so you don't have to exercise quite as aggressively to still get a beneficial impact on exercise. So again, yoga or lighter kind of light loads, not heavy weight or not weight at all, just body weight type of activity to your ability to tolerate it. And sometimes what happens too, Andrea, is that you have to start small, work your strength up, and sometimes that can take months and months and months. I've seen it take as much as 6 months for a person to start with really mild yoga, work up to body weight, and from body weight work up to some resistance activity with some lighter free weights. It can take some time, but always exercise should always be done to tolerance, and so always err to the side of caution of doing less as opposed to doing more, especially if you find that it flares you. But try those 3 and see how well you do with that. Okay. I like that. Jason says, drinking Bailey's from a shoe during this live feed. Life is going downhill fast. Well, if you're talking about Bailey's Irish whiskey, I would agree. Rotten milk mixed with whiskey made from wheat may taste really good, but the outcome is not really great. Thanks for making me laugh, though, and chiming in, Jason. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, I think I answered that question already. Okay, so my grandmother had RA. It's hereditary. Does this mean I will never be normal again? No, RA is not hereditary in the sense that you think it is. Certainly diseases can be hereditary in the sense that you can have a genetic predisposition. Gluten sensitivity is a perfect example of genetic predisposition. Although gluten sensitivity is not a disease, if you have gluten sensitivity genes and you expose them to gluten, then they will create an inflammatory response that can contribute to disease. And it's the same thing with diseases like rheumatoid arthritis and the other autoimmune arthritides. There are a couple of different gene factors on the HLA genes. HLA-B27, for example, a positive HLA-B27 increases the risk for the development of a type of autoimmune arthritis called spondyloarthritis. So there certainly are genetic undertones, but don't choose to doom yourself to a fate that isn't necessarily the fate that you have to have with any form of autoimmune disease. And I've seen this. I've seen case after case after case of autoimmunity go into remission with diet and lifestyle change. And so don't doom yourself to the fate because your mom had that fate. Your mom could have been making some very wrong decisions, some very bad decisions, not sleeping, not getting sunshine, not managing stress, not having life balance, eating the wrong foods. There could have been infection involved. Sometimes with RA or RA-like symptoms, there's a Lyme infection. Sometimes there's Klebsiella or Pseudomonas infection. So there are a lot of different variables that play into that. And don't just doom yourself over the fact that you think that it's family history, because the reality is, if it were family history, look, since 1950, we've seen autoimmune disease skyrocket more than 400%. What's the reason that that's happened? Because prior to 1950, it wasn't that high. And it's not that we diagnose it better. That's not why. The reason we see it skyrocketing is because there's more environmental factors and environmental triggers that we're being exposed to on a consistent basis that can trigger autoimmune disease. So find out what your triggers are. Find out what those reasons are, and you'll have the freedom freedom from the illness in a nutshell. Okay. I like this. So Marie is chiming in. She says, yeah, that's me. Since cutting out gluten, grains, wheat, I have been able to be around cats and no more asthma attacks. So perfect example of what I was just talking about. So cold urticaria and vitamin deficiencies, is there a link? Yeah, there is. There can be. Cold urticaria, probably two of the more common ones I've seen associated with it is vitamin D, and the other one is zinc deficiency. So again, those can be present in that particular type of condition. Another one is vitamin A. So there certainly are nutritional links to that particular condition. My thoughts on organic alcohol. Look, it depends on where the alcohol comes from. we need to do a show on alcohol. But the reason I don't do a show on alcohol is because I don't condone drinking a lot of alcohol. To do a show on alcohol would mean that I'm condoning everybody to just go drink alcohol. What is alcohol? It's a slow poison. It poisons your liver. That's what it does. Now, certainly it makes you feel good. It makes you feel loopy. It can relax you. So from a stress perspective, alcohol can be somewhat medicinal. So I'm not absolutely opposed to it either. But is where the problem is some people take it way too far. And again, I know that's everybody's individual freedom of expression and choice to be able to do that. But with alcohols, one of the things you got to be concerned with is this right here, grain alcohols. A lot of your supplements, this is one of those hidden fillers, the grain alcohols. You know, what are a lot of your grain alcohols made from? Most of them are made from GMO corn. And so some people will say, yeah, but alcohol doesn't contain gluten, Dr. Osborne. Well, I mean, you distill the alcohol, and technically there's no gluten protein in it, but it's still derived from a food that you're highly reactive to, and if you're gluten sensitive, that's genetic. So there's more to this gluten sensitivity puzzle than just the protein gluten, and that's part of why I don't recommend any grain alcohols if you've been diagnosed with gluten sensitivity or you have a gluten issue, because there's more to it than just gluten in and of itself. And I see people reacting to grain alcohol all the time, reacting very, very poorly. So again, maybe it's partly because of the glyphosate from the genetically modified version. Maybe it's some of the corn derivative, but a number of your alcohols, your grain alcohols, they're wheat based or they're corn based. Some of them are sugar based, and you know, sugar from a gluten or from a gluten sensitivity perspective is a better option or a better alternative than some of the other grain based alcohols. But you know, if you're doing a supplement that has an alcohol base, you have to ask, where's that alcohol coming from and what's it made from, what's it derived from, and is it organic or is it not organic? Those to me would be very important questions to ask if I were going to take a product with that in it. Okay, so yeah, Veronica is chiming in. Can't wait to try gluten-free bread. Can I buy and store it for how long? So I am delayed allergy to psyllium seed and hoping that will go away next test. Okay, so yeah, those of you who don't know, we've been working on this for almost 2 years, and I'm going to go ahead and announce it because we're running low on time. We have something that we've just released, and it's not even ready yet, but you can pick it up early and save 20% right now if you want to get it before the holidays, because we're almost sold out. As a matter of fact, I think of our existing stock, we've already sold more than half of it, so it won't last probably but another week. And if you're interested, if you're looking for a solid, low carbohydrate, organic sourced bread or whole purpose flour that can be used to make other things, we've been testing it in our kitchen, in our test kitchen, and we've got a cinnamon roll recipe. I might even have some pictures of that, a step-by-step of that. We've got a hamburger bun recipe. We've got a loaf bread recipe. We've got a French bread recipe. We've got some different types of cookies and brownies and tortillas and crepes and a number of other things that you can make with it. But it's our new Warrior bread mix. And if you go, and we can put the link up in the feed for you if you're interested and you want to, like I said, if you want to get it before the holidays, because we're testing it out. I think we're testing it out probably this week. It's pie crust, because we want to have, for Thanksgiving, we want to have the ability to make a true gluten-free pumpkin pie crust that tastes delicious. So that'll be the next thing. But you can pick your bags up. We'll put that link up in the feed for those of you who are interested. There's no coupon code required. You just go there now and you can save 20% off, and we're only going to sell it until we run out. And once we run out, it'll be back in stock, but it'll probably be several months after the holidays. So if you want to get that in for your holiday baking, go ahead and make sure you pick that up. Again, we'll probably sell out before the end of the week. We're already halfway gone with it. So again, those of you who are interested in looking for something, again, it's low carbohydrate, high fiber, and it's keto approved. If you're following a ketogenic diet, you can use it. But again, we're really proud of this mix because it's taken a lot of R&D to really pull it together. So go on over to glutenfreesociety.org and get that if that's something that you have been looking for, and let us know what you think. One of the other things we're doing with this is a very fun project that we're working on, is we're creating a living cookbook. And so what I mean by a living cookbook is it's a cookbook that changes, and we're adding recipes to it all the time, and we're going to allow you to add your recipes. So as you get the flour mix and you try it and you mix it with different things, you're going to be allowed to upload your recipes. So we're trying to create a very valuable resource that, you know, there to this point there really hasn't been a great grain-free, truly gluten-free bread mix product out there that tasted that didn't taste terrible, right? So again, this is a kind of a pet project that we've been working on for a couple of years, and we finally have it dialed in, and we're super excited about it. And we encourage you to come on over and try it out too. And again, we'll put a link up to our living cookbook here probably within the next few weeks. We're still working on the back end of it and making sure that you can input your recipes as well. But by the time that mix is ready and you've got some of your own recipes dialed in, we'll have that ready for you. Okay. All right, yeah, so like, a lot of you saying I miss bread. So that's a good question. I mean, one of the things that we've been online and teaching people about gluten sensitivity and autoimmune disease just online. I've been doing it in a clinic for almost 20 years, but online we've been doing it since 2010. And I was very, very hesitant and very, very reticent to even create a recipe because I thought that, you know, people going gluten-free really just probably should just forget about bread, because if they keep their mind on the food, then they'll just continually think emotionally how they're missing something, right? And then they'll beat themselves up emotionally over it. But what kind of wisdom and time taught me is that many people feel more socially isolated and socially depressed when they can't partake in some of those kind of traditional foods, and that's part of the reason why we actually wanted to bring it out, was that reason there. I'd love to get your opinion, since we're doing the show tonight. How many of you felt when you go gluten free? How many of you really want a bread, or how many of you could take it or leave it? I've had a few of you in the feed say that, you know, you could take it or leave it, but how many of you really it's something that you feel like would really help you in that social aspect? Just out of curiosity, to help me know how you feel about it. Okay. All right. So it's kind of a mixed bag. A lot of you are like, yeah, absolutely, and some of you are like, no, I'm good. That's kind of what I thought. I thought that we'd see it about 50-50. I personally could go either way. I could leave it or take it, but you know, having some now and again can be a nice thing too. All right. So we're at the hour. We're at the end of the hour. We're going to be back again next week for Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain, and make sure hit that button above and hit subscribe, and that way you'll get a notice when we do go live, and you'll be able to tune in and get your questions answered. Of course, you can always visit us at youtube.com/glutenology. Subscribe to our feed there, and you'll be able to access all of our historical archives of the Pick Dr. Osborne Brain Show. And then make sure you go over to visit us at glutenfreesociety.org, and you can sign up and get our free gluten-free survival kit. You can also check out all of our gluten-free resources. We've got more resources than anywhere else in the world on the gluten-free diet and the gluten-free lifestyle. You can also come visit me at drpeterosborne.com if you want to learn more about our clinic, Origins Healthcare, and our outreach in the public and how we help people find real solutions to chronic inflammatory illness. So we'll see you next week. Hope the rest of your week is fantastic. This is Dr. Osborne signing out. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.